All right, before we go to our next chapter, I want to do a quick little distributive property practice. And the distributive property, if you remember, kind of looks like this. If I have something that says 2 times the quantity of x plus 3, and I want to simplify this, I have a kind of a specific rule and something that I'm supposed to do. Now, when I take this, I see a couple of errors sometimes. And I see people say, oh, it's 2x plus 3. And I can get rid of the parentheses, and I'm just going to multiply this as 2x plus 3, because I just multiplied the things that are next to each other, and that's how we do things. Unfortunately, that's not correct, because when we see this as a 2 times quantity x plus 3, what I need to remember is this 2 gets distributed over the entire parentheses. So for example, this 2 then needs to go times the x and also times the 3. So in this case, I would write this as 2 times x plus 2 times 3. And then with a quick simplify, I can write this as 2x plus 6. And that would be the correct way to simplify a distributive property equation looking like this. Now, our distributive property looks like this, and it says if I multiply something over 2 different things, b plus c, what I need to do is I need to multiply the a by b and c. So I can rewrite this as ab plus ac. And in fact, sometimes you can even get more. So for example, if I were to write it like this, a times b plus c plus d, I would again have to distribute it over the entire inside that I have. Everything inside of the parentheses needs to be multiplied by whatever on the outside. So this would be a b plus ac plus AD. And that is incredibly important. Okay, let's look at a couple of examples. So first, they're going to ask you to distribute things over like we were talking about. So number 1 goes like this. 9 times 3 plus 7v. All right, this is pretty easy. All I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that I distribute both over to both sides. Let me grab another color. We'll call this example 1. So 9 times 3 is 27, plus 9 times 7 is 63. That's a T, not a plus. 63v. And I have now simplified that out. And that's typically where I want to go. But sometimes I'm going to be going in the opposite direction. And we're going to get to that in a moment. What I want to talk about first is something that can throw off a lot of people when we have some negative numbers. For example, let's take a look at this problem in example 2. It says 5 times 10 minus 9c. All right, now I know this says minus 9c, but I hate this minus sign. Don't ever see it as a minus sign and don't think of it like that. Think of it instead as a negative sign, denoting that number is negative. Instead, I want you to think of it like this. 5 times 10 plus negative 9c. Now notice I have nested parentheses here, but it's important to note that this negative kind of goes with this term right here. They are kind of one and they stick together. Notice this term does not have a negative. It's simply that 10. So now I need to distribute that 5 over just like I did before. And the key thing I need to remember is that I have my 5 times 10, which is 50. And then I'm going to be adding well, 5 times negative 9c, 5 times 9 is 45, and it's negative, plus negative 45c. Now, I don't have to write these parentheses inside like this, but in this case I'm doing it so that we can see and practice. So now, this is not really simplified, because if I'm going to add a negative number, that's really just subtracting. But the key is to keep my negatives together and to remember what's negative and what's positive. Okay? Let's do one more example looking at negative and positives. Example 3. All right, in this case, let's do negative 3 times 4x minus 6. All right, so in this case, I'm going to basically do the same thing that I did before. Now, I'm not going to rewrite out that 4x plus negative 6, but I am going to make sure to multiply to both of these sides. So in this case, I'm going to take negative 3 times 4x, and that's going to give me 3 times 4 is 12, 12x. Negative times a positive gives me a negative. So I have negative 12x. Then I have negative 3 times negative 6. Negative 3 times negative 6. That's going to give me 18. Negative times a negative is a positive, so it's going to give me a plus 18. And this is the key again to make sure that I have my negatives and my positives where they need to be. Okay, 2 more. Promise I'm almost done. This time we're going to look at going the opposite direction. This time they're going to give you the distributed example. It's going to say 15 plus 36y, and they're going to ask you to pull something out of the distributive property. So what we're going to need to find first is a factor that fits into both of these. 15 and 36. What fits into both? Well, what jumps out to me is probably 3, because my rule for divisibility of 3s is if I add up the sum of the digits, I get 6 here, because 1 plus 5, and here is 9. And then my sum of my digits are both divisible by 3, so 3 is going to fit into these. So I'm going to pull that 3 out, and this time I just need to write what would I multiply by 3 to get to this point. So I can kind of like divide both of these by 3. 15 divided by 3 is going to be 5 plus, and 36 divided by 3, well, 30 divided by 3 is 10, and 2 more 3s would be 12. And I can even test it out. Okay, do a quick test. And if I do 3 times 5 plus 12y, I can even distribute it back out. Let's see if I'm right. I do get 15, and 3 times 12 is 36. It works. Nice. So my answer in this case is here, going the other direction. And one last example, and this is where it can get a little bit tricky, the hardest section, is when I'm going backwards and I have negative numbers. So in this case, say I have this problem. I have 8 minus 44m. And I need to pull something out of both of these. Well, what's going to jump to me that I'm going to be pulling out is this 4 seems pretty good, because 4 definitely fits into 8 and it definitely fits into 44. So I have a 4, and I'm just going to divide both sides here by 4. 8 divided by 4 is going to be 2, and 44, or negative 44 divided by 4, well, 40 divided by 4 is 10, and another 1 is going to make it 11. So I'm going to have negative 11m, because I need to make sure to keep my negatives correct. Because remember, this negative goes with this term. It kind of fits in there, and I want to make sure that it stays there and it stays correct, and it fits along with what I had originally. There we go. One last weird one that you might see sometimes, and these can often have 2 answers. Example 6. I'll move it up. Is if I have something like this. Let's see. Let's go with negative 15 minus 50z. Well, in this case, the number that I can pull out of both is actually going to be a negative number because they're both negative. So I'm going to pull out a negative 5 to the front. And I'm going to divide both of these by negative 5 to get to my answer. Negative 15 divided by 5 is going to be 3. Negative 50 divided by 5 is going to be 10. So now suddenly when I had two negatives, I'm going to be adding, negative 10z, or sorry, 10z. And this actually works because when I push that negative 5 back into my whole thing, they're both going to end up negative and it's going to work out just fine. Go ahead and do your practices. If you get stuck or confused, ask a friend, ask online, or ask for help from an adult. Good luck. Thank you.